I would say we get started right into the first interview. On stage, we have Markus Koepke from a solo developer from Germany. Markus, how are you?
Hi, thank you for having me. Was it weird that I was already sitting here?
No, it was fine. You're comfy. It's like a comfy stage.
Yeah, it feels like like at home. It's very nice.
Yeah, very nice. So, you wrote to me that you like arrived with a train here in Malmö and with a good book you wrote.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us what kind of book you're currently reading?
Sure. I'm reading Gok Magok, which is a very weird, I guess, fantasy sci-fi novel. I forgot the authors. It's two authors actually. It was recommended to me, or not to me, not to me specifically, but recommended on Twitter by the developer of Citizen Sleeper. So yeah, he wrote about that book and how much he loves it, and I liked the cover actually and the name, and I was intrigued, and I just got it, and it didn't disappoint so far. It's very weird and very very interesting.
Awesome. Did you enjoy Citizen Sleeper? Have you played it?
Yeah, I love it. I'm very much looking forward to the sequel.
Awesome. So you not only brought a book with you, but also a game.
Yes.
Would you like to give us a short introduction to what game you brought?
Yes, of course. So I'm making a game called Journey Beyond the Edge of the World, and it's a first-person adventure game, which is set on a ship that is lost at sea. And players wake up on the ship, and they don't know who they are, what happened to the ship, where the ship is. They don't know anything, basically. And just like in a classic mystery mystery adventure game, you basically figure everything out for yourself. So you can explore the ship and get access to new areas by solving puzzles, which are usually related to like finding a specific item, combining items, figuring out how a device or machine works, and repairing a device or machine, and also using the environment to like manipulate things. For example, you have realistic rope physics in the game. I mean, it's a ship after all, so there's got to be some rope puzzles, obviously. So you can use ropes to pull stuff that you couldn't pull away with your own hands, use winches and that sort of thing. So yeah, so it's a very interactive environment that you find yourself in. Yeah, and it has a very deep narrative. It's a retro sci-fi story set in 1953. And the only thing that you find out pretty early on is that the ship has left the harbor of Hamburg, actually. So most of the crew has kind of roots in the city of Hamburg. So I'm based in Hamburg, so I'm kind of exploring this post-war era in the city of Hamburg, which I think is very, very interesting, and I don't think has been explored in a video game before. So I feel like it's way past due to do that. And yeah, that's most of the things that I think are important about the game. So yeah.
And there's no secret that we did a little bit of pre-investigation and interview yesterday, just to be prepared here. And something that struck me was that you come from a background of cinematography as well. How have you been applying all that to your game, and what does it mean to you to come from this background and then start making games? Because that's two different worlds, even though you have like cinematics and stuff like that will overlap those two worlds, but that's maybe about it. So how has it helped you making the game that you have?
Yeah, so I've always been interested in making, well, not always, but for a long time I've been interested in making a game making games because I just see there's so many crossovers from making films to making games, especially in the last decade or so, when games have gotten more cinematic and the possibilities in terms of visual effects have made it possible to create more interesting lighting situations and that sort of thing. So yeah, I was always interested in it, and I feel like there are so many things that I can apply to how I make a game. So, for example, when I set up my scene, I basically, in terms of lighting, and I just find myself in the same thought process as I would be when I'm lighting a set, because it's basically the same thing, and it's actually cooler because it's way easier to just place a light wherever you want, and you can like place it somewhere, and you're not going to see a light stand because you don't need it. So I get to be way more creative than I could be on my regular job usually, because yeah, I mean, there's no limit to how many lights or what kind of lights I set up and what I do with the scene and how I manipulate it. So that's the one thing, and of course also like compositional wise, it's very interesting to me because that's where the main difference comes in. I think, where as a cinematographer, when I'm like composing a shot with my director, it's usually like the director and we can decide on where the people should look, and we compose the frame. And in an interactive thing like a video game, especially like in a first-person game that I'm making, there's no such thing. The players decide themselves where to look and how to frame their shot, so to speak. And that's very interesting to me because I find myself in this situation where I'm trying to make wherever the players look, make it look great, you know? And that's challenging, but it's very, very interesting because it puts you into this like, basically three-dimensional thinking on how to like set up a scene to make it interesting from every angle, and also to tend to the needs of a player in terms of like guidance with light and guidance with things that you put into the level, and how you can lead the player through a level like that. And that's just like a layer that gets added on top of my thinking in terms of how I set up a scene that's just not there in terms of when I make films. So that's what excites me the most in terms of transferring my knowledge from cinematography to making games.
You just were mentioning that you're trying to make things look good for the player, basically. So what also stands out about your game is the art style, right? I mean, in the last years, we have seen several games with like this PlayStation 1 pixelated art style, but you are doing more. You're not just doing like low resolution, blurry textures, but there's more to your game, more effects, more like visual things that make it really interesting and unique. Could you elaborate a little on how you arrived there?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm doing more. I think I'm just doing something different in that regards. I really like this whole idea of going for this kind of retro style and going back to like more simplistic graphic styles. I think it's very interesting. And when I started making the game and was looking for a artistic style I could approach, there were some very simple thoughts I had. Basically, I listened to a talk of the developer of A Short Hike a while back, and he talked about how the art style of A Short Hike came to be. And the main thing was that he said, I'm just not a good 3D artist, so I tried to find a style that I could use, where I can work with low poly models and still make it look good and make it look interesting. And that I found it so cool that he like basically admitted to that, because it's true. I mean, it's fine if you're like not like a great artist or whatever, but you still want to like do something creative and put something out there and find something that you can work with in the limits that you can work with, and make it great and make it great looking. And that's what he did, and that stuck with me. And I was like, okay, well, I know a bit about 3D modeling, but I'm not going to be able to make a AAA looking visual style, not on my own at least. So I was looking for a different approach, and as I said, I've always been interested in this PS1 style thing, but I wanted to do something else in terms of making it more atmospheric and a little bit different in that regard. So I try to find like a way to go like a middle ground between that style and a bit more modern things, which led me to have this kind of pixelated visual style, with still kind of more detailed models in parts, and infuse that with a lot of visual effects, because that's what I feel like I needed to convey this feeling of being on this ship on your own in the middle of the ocean. There are a lot of situations in the game where there's very rough weather, so you have like these huge waves hitting the ship, and it's foggy, and water hits you in the face, and I really wanted that to be in there. And when I started experimenting with that stuff early on, and seeing how that works together with this pixelated style, I just love that. And so I kept on pursuing that, and I'm still refining how to combine those two things. And so far, I've only gotten a good response for it, and I'm still very confident that it's the best approach for how I can make the game, and what is good for the game, and what makes it stand out as well. Yeah.
You really are a one-man army on this project, Markus. That's for sure. And something you also told me about was you started out with music being a big part of the game.
Yeah.
But in the end, you like sort of drilled to someone else. And I was very intrigued about how you said about the sounds in the game, what you did to make the sounds.
Yeah, so the game actually started out, as you said, with music. So I'm not a musician, but I got interested in making electronic music a while back, actually before I started making games. And as everyone who started getting into like synthesizers probably knows, it's like a barrel without a bottom. So once you dive in, you just keep on buying new synthesizers and you start exploring new things. And I got very interested in modular stuff, so I started like setting up and building my own synthesizers and all that stuff. So I was very much into that whole like creating sound design, and making like experimental electronic music, and that's how the whole project basically started, with me like creating this concept for a music album it was a concept album with like a story about a sailor getting lost at sea and his ship taking him to the edge of the world and beyond. So that's how the whole thing started. And I was, since I'm first and foremost a filmmaker, I was thinking about like, well, I'm going to need like a visual thing for this music, for this album, like a music video or something like that. So I started going into that direction, and the first thing I tried was like making a sort of interactive music video thing, where you basically just have this music video going on, but you can interact in it, like move your character a little bit. And that was I found so interesting that I continued going down that road, and that slowly turned into like an actual game, and then it kind of spiraled out of control and turned into this big game that I'm making now. And the music actually took a little step back after that, because there was so much that I found to be interesting in actually making in a game, that the music still is very much in the game, but it got like a specific point where the music comes into play. So during the game, you only hear sounds and atmospherics, and you don't hear any music, and you get to these situations once you solved enough puzzles, where you unlock like a music sequence, an interactive music sequence, where my initial ideas come back. So so I'm trying to make it, turn it into an interesting thing where there's like this loop of solving puzzles and playing a game, and then getting to these interactive music sequences. And on top of that, as you mentioned, the sounds in the game are very important to me. So anyone who's playing the demo will immediately notice there's like so many stuff happening on the audio layer. I'm using spatial audio in the game just to like, have have it feel like there's a wave coming from here and the rope stretching from there, and when you hear the creaks on the bottom when you on the ground on the deck when you walk, it feels like they're actually coming from that spot. And once I started experimenting with that, I quickly realized it would be great to make this the actual topic of the game, where the sounds are also like, or the exploration of the sounds are also part of the gameplay. So, for example, you have these situations in the gameplay loop where you are locating sounds on the ship, where all the sounds around you that get toned down, and you only hear this one specific sound coming from somewhere on the ship. And then you find it with just like localizing. Does it come from here or does it come from there? And then you go there, and then the puzzle continues basically. And yeah, that's I think very interesting to me to go down that road. And I'm still like implementing all these new things. And yeah, it's cool. It's fun.
And on that note, I want to hear about, because you said that you make your own sounds for the game.
Yeah, I mean,
that process. It sounds very interesting and very fun actually to do that. So how did you make your sounds?
Yeah, so I'm doing this like hybrid approach of doing like traditional Foley recordings, which I have done in the past for films as well, but it's definitely like a new thing for me in terms of like the scope. But it's just fun. I mean, just once you're in that thought process of like I know what kind of sounds I want for my ship or for the game, it's basically, it just follows you all day. So wherever I go, when I hear an interesting sound, I'm like, oh, this could be like this winch thing that's like turning, or like when I'm at the playground with my kids, and there's like my kids run over this rope bridge or whatever, and the rope is stretching. I'm like, oh, I got to come back here at night when it's completely quiet with my field recorder and record this rope because it sounds amazing, you know. So that's what's currently happening to me whenever I'm not at the desk like making the actual game. I'm like thinking about sounds that I might capture. And my parents have a boat which they are unfortunately planning on selling. So at some point I have to go there again. I haven't been there in a while. It's in a different city than I live, and just like walk around the boat and record actual boat sounds, because in the end that makes the most sense. But yeah, so it's this hybrid approach of doing this Foley recordings. And also synthesizing sounds with my modular systems. So yeah, so it's both, and it's very, very, very much fun.
Yeah,
You just mentioned your parents having a boat, basically, and this is not your first game where the sea and being at sea seems to be at the center of the game or of the gameplay. So what's your relationship to the sea or to life at sea, basically?
Yeah, I mostly spent like my childhood on a boat, I would say. So all my dad is a sailor through and through, and so he when he was before me and my brother were born, he was sailing the seas of the world, and then he continued on doing that with his family afterwards. And basically every summer holiday and during the summer, each weekend, we would spend time on the boat up until I was a teenager and didn't want to come with them anymore. So yeah, so we had like these there were some like crazy situations where we got into storms and all that stuff, and all that things just like stuck to me. And even though I kind of let that like sailing life go, and I'm not interested in like having a boat or sailing with my family. I'm still very much interested in boats, and I love like walking around harbors and just being at the sea, and I just still find it so amazing, like this exploration aspect of it. And I love games and films about like exploring the seas and all that stuff. So that's what kind of led me to try to make a game set on a ship. And I keep finding myself like thinking back to how I felt as a kid when I was sailing with my parents. like thinking I'm exploring something, even though everywhere we went there were basically like predefined routes, obviously, and there were lots of ships and there was not that much exploration going on. But for me as a young kid, it was like, we're like sailing the world and exploring everything. So I was sitting there, are pictures of me as a kid sitting like on the nautical chart and mapping a course, and I probably didn't know what I was doing, but like looking back at that is so I find so cool to just like try to bring back those feelings that I had as a kid. And I mean, in the end, when we play a game, it's I think many of us are like trying to get back to the child inside, and being like just letting go and exploring, and and that's what I find super cool, interesting. Yeah.
So you mentioned that the game takes place in the post time of what?
In the 50s, yeah. So post World War II, yeah.
Post World War II.
Yeah.
But you also mentioned timelines that you have,
Yeah.
that you will experience different timelines.
Yes.
How does that work?
Yeah. So the story is kind of a retro sci-fi story, and there's this thing going on the ship. So you wake up on the ship, and the ship is like pretty much intact and everything is fine, but you feel that something is kind of off. And at some point you find this tape recorder, and you find a tape that is basically an audio log recorded by someone called the Inventor, or the game just calls him that for the time being. And you don't quite fully understand exactly what's going on there, but you quickly realize that this ship was on some kind of mission or exploration, and this inventor person, he left all these weird devices on the ship, and one of those devices that you find allows you to open these portals into a different timeline on the ship. And when you step through, you enter these timelines and these kind of glimpses of a different situation, and that allows you to like jump into different situations the ship found itself in on its journey. So you're basically backwards exploring the journey, so to speak. And at some point it gets a bit crazy and everything. I'm not going to spoil it, but so that's where these different timelines comes in. And what I think makes it interesting is that it's everything is set on this one ship, so it's a confined space. But since you go into these different timelines, things shift around, and like areas that you couldn't access before that you can access in a certain timeline, or like things change, and and the layout changes, so it keeps it interesting, and it has you like switching between timelines to do things that you couldn't do in the other timeline. So I'm very much exploring that as a gameplay mechanic to like jump around these timelines, and it's very much rooted in the story. So that's very important to me, to not just have like these gimmicky mechanics in there, but even though it's a sci-fi story, which makes it obviously a bit fantastical, so to speak. Everything that's happening in the game in terms of what you can do on the ship is rooted in the narrative, and and it has a very personal layer to it. So all the people that were on the ship, and this inventor character and the player character, they all I think are very multi-layered personalities, and you gradually find out who they were and what kind of life they lived back in Hamburg, and what led them to go on this journey, and what this entire journey is all about in the end.
Awesome. So it really looked yesterday. It looked really like the game is very popular. You were like busy all the time. We were like trying to talk to you, and there was always some person playing the game, and you were really busy. It was really great. We can say quickly that you're still looking for a publisher, so if everyone is interested,
yes.
There you go. Also, the last question we would like to ask every developer here on stage is, it's not a very good time for the games industry right now, right? We have like studios closing, there have been layoffs, it's difficult to get like finances and stuff like that. what gives you hope in this time? Is there something that pushes you forward about games? Why are you still like making games even in a time like this?
Wow, that's a very deep question.
Asking for a quick answer here.
I think the short answer would be that there's just no alternative for me because I'm so passionate about making games and making this game specifically. So I've started quite a few projects. As most indie developers probably know, there's like always this: you sit on the bus and you have this idea for a game, and then you're like, oh, I need to make this game, and then you let go of that other idea. And I've finished a few, but I've never been so attached to a project for so long. I've been working on this game for more than a year now, and I don't think I've ever lost interest in like continuing on. That like shows me that it's definitely something that I want to continue making. And yeah, I just find it. I just love making games, and I want to continue doing that. And even though it's a bumpy road, and especially being solo, there are of course like many. Yeah, it's tricky and difficult to do, and being in this industry is difficult for sure. But I feel kind of. Yeah, there's no alternative for me, and I'm trying to make my way through it, and I want to continue. So,
Awesome. Thanks so much, Markus, for being on stage. Thanks
Sure,
for your
thank you.
time.
Thank you, guys.
Enjoy the rest of the conference. All the best of luck for your game and finding a publisher, maybe. Yeah. So now we have like.
Yeah, let's give Markus a round of applause.
Thank you.
We should welcome the next on stage.
Yes.
Thank you so much, Markus.
Thank you guys. I'm just gonna grab all my stuff from back here. Yes, thank you. And then that.